This is Phil McNally with Artspeak, and we have Artist to Artist going on, which is a subsidiary of Artspeak. And what we do with Artist to Artist is we talk to artists, and we've talked to quite a few of them. But today is a very good day for me. Uh, Not because it's the day after the solar eclipse, which is why I kind of did my thing yesterday, because that was the solar eclipse yesterday, and it was quite fascinating. I'm in Texas. We actually got the full path, and we actually had everything go dark, and it was different. It was just really, it was like a Twilight Zone. But anyway, we had fun, and I'm bringing this guy on, which is his name is Ian Roberts, and if anybody who does art does not know Ian Roberts, time to learn about Ian Roberts, because he is one of my favorites out of all the artists. He does really get into things. So let's bring him on. Ian, I appreciate you being here.
Well, Phil, it's delightful to be here. Thank you.
Great. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about you. I really want to get into where you've been, what you've been doing, and where you're at. Ian, guys who don't know him, but kind of know me and some of the things that I do, he is really wonderful in teaching right now, and has been for a long time, composition. And I'm finding that with a lot of artists, just composition is somewhere out there. It's almost like it's almost like color in a way. Sometimes people, what's a value? What's all this? What's a red, yellow and blue kind of scenario? But Ian is what I'm understanding is mainly into composition, and he's basically, to me, a master at it. I really like looking at his materials, his videos, which he's got a lot. He's been in the business for I think over 40 years. He's been at it for 60. His father, it was an artist, and his wife is an artist. They live in Los Angeles. And Ian, just amazing stuff. When I see your stuff, I have gotten one of your books, Mastering Composition, and it has been fascinating. It is a different look at, I guess, behind the scenes of what all these Da Vinci's and Rembrandt's, the kind of artists, were doing when they were painting, that you didn't really know about that much. I mean, the way things got into their art to make it so appealing and bring it in. So give us a little bit of idea of your book, and your teachings, and your people you do, your students.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Uh, I teach composition because let's say you were going to build a house and you had a lot and you said, okay, so look, I want the lumber brought in here and I want the sheetrock and I want some gravel. And then you just start nailing some things together and sitting some sheetrock on it and putting some T-vac over the top. And you realize that's not how you build a house. You build a house by putting in a foundation, right? And the foundation then allows all that stuff to be put together in such a way that the house will last. The other one is sort of like a shelter, but it's not a home. And so if you go to an art store, a bookstore, and look that has a good art book selection, you'll see some there on oils, and you'll see some on watercolor, and you'll see some on portraits and still life and landscape, but you won't find hardly any books on composition. And if they are, they're old books, Edgar Payne or Poor or some of these other people. And the point is, it doesn't matter what your subject matter is, and it doesn't matter what medium you're using. If you haven't built the painting from a sound foundation, it's not standing on anything that's going to last. And the moment most people, in a way, approach painting in terms of, well, I want to paint that person or that landscape, and they approach it in terms of the subject matter. Oh, that's a barn. I think that'll make a good painting, that barn. Whereas my feeling is you really need to approach the painting through structure and design first, and it happens to be a barn second. which means that it might be a beautiful barn. You might walk around it, take a picture of it. But really, having walked around it and looking at what the sun is doing, the only way you could do a painting of this maybe is 4 in the afternoon on a sunny day where the shadows are doing this. And now you're thinking in terms of lights and darks and shadow shapes. That is actually what the painting is about, not the barn. I mean, you need the barn because otherwise nothing's happening at all. But the barn isn't the subject. The subject is actually the masses of lights and darks on the picture plane. Well, most people don't think that way. And it's really a right brain way of approaching it. Whereas most people say, oh, that's a good subject, kind of from a left brain standpoint. And if I put marks in here for the boards and marks up here for the roof and marks there for the trees, an additive approach, if I add it all up, eventually I'll end up with a painting. But in fact, you very well might not. And you might get halfway through and realized, ooh, boy, I hadn't thought of that. And that's
Hmm.
sure not working. And then you just get bogged down and you don't know what to do
Right.
because you're trying to figure out the foundation, the structure, sort of after the fact, as opposed to being the sparking inspiration for why you do it at all.
Well, isn't that kind of like from the point of, because I'm definitely in that boat, and I have a library full of reference photos. And the only way I've had these reference photos is that I took into mind as far as what stands out on these photos. And I can see that easily because it's like a photographer. They go into it as, okay, is the lighting correct? Is the subject correct? Is this all the part I'm having a problem with, what they don't, is that, is it all positioned correctly? And I find that why unfortunately, I copy photos and paint them. And the photos aren't, to me, from a photo standpoint, they look great. But
Right.
from a painting standpoint, I am missing something. I mean, I'm not actually trying to do. I did try to do realism at one point, which was so wrong because you can't ever copy a photo. But when you start painting in a painterly way, or I'm impressionistic, so I paint, brushwork. My brushwork's more impressionistic. It just doesn't look right. It doesn't come out like a photograph, the way that the photograph, not that the photograph came out, it's the how the photograph was taken.
Right.
And I miss that. I miss it.
Well, I mean, the thing is, photography, I mean, when you look at really good photographs, there's powerful compositional structure to that, and at least the ones that attract me. And what the photographs that grab me are the ones where somebody has seen something that I haven't seen,
Mhm.
or has seen something that I probably wouldn't have seen, or has been there with camera in hand, waiting for something they think might
Right.
happen, and bang, they nailed it,
Right. Right.
right?
Hmm.
And Cartier-Bresson's The Decisive Moment, or whatever it is, that thing is actually happening. Well, I remember hearing a story about a woman who had taken this photograph of this island, it was Newfoundland or something, and this rock with this piece of lightning hitting it and just lighting it up in the middle of the night. And she had an exhibition. It was the opening, and some woman or person came up to her and said, "Oh, you're so lucky to get that photograph." And the woman was practically, the photographer practically spitting. I camped on an island for 7 days to get that photograph. I mean, she was furious that somebody could
Yeah.
say lucky,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You don't know the
So
work that I went into to get all that done.
yeah, so photographers have that limitation of actually having to be there. I mean, unless
Hmm.
they're using Photoshop, let's say. Um, but as a painter, you've got a different thing. You can change a lot in a photograph. The problem is, I know, well, again, when I teach my course on drawing, at the end of it, after 6 weeks. I was mentioning before that they have a 30-day challenge.
Mhm.
And they've been doing images that I give them during the course because the idea is to sort of see how composition works and how the eye moves on the picture plane and all these different elements of good composition. But then when they start looking at their photographs, their travel photographs and everything that they've taken over the years, thinking, oh, now I'm going to do my own, they realize after everything we've been doing 6 weeks, oh, they're all terrible. There's,
Exactly.
there's
I
nothing
bet.
here of any use. Like, for example, National Geographic, they send these photographers out to take pictures of
Hmm.
landscapes,
Hmm.
right? Spectacular, but they're no use for painting. They're photographs.
Hmm.
And, you could make a painting of some light in the late afternoon hitting a couple of flowers and putting a shadow across some grass that could make a great photograph or
Hmm.
could make a great painting. I mean, I'll tell you the most common experience that I have on my YouTube videos. I have a YouTube, I've had today was my last YouTube video
Well,
after
here,
144 of them. And
congratulations.
um, the most common comment that I always got was that I didn't like your photograph. It looked boring, but I love your painting. And the point is, they're looking for something in the photograph that they're used to, subject matter, interest, things happening, razzle dazzle. I don't know. All I'm looking at, as I said, is sort of these light and dark shapes.
Mm.
Doesn't look like anything when you're looking at it as a photograph, but I'm seeing its potential. Doesn't always happen, but I'm seeing its potential as a painting, and that's what I'm seeing, the design and the structure. And that's what I'm responding to. And the beauty of it is that when those design shapes are good, they carry the painting, which allows you to eliminate 90% of the detail in the
Mm.
photograph, which usually bogs people down. It's like they're doing a paint, oh, they're in France and they get this wonderful photograph and they've got all the little flower pots in on the windowsills and they've got the little table there with the wine on it and the people. And it's just like, no, 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 no. It's too complicated. Too complicated. It's just subject driven and it's going to bury you. So um, that idea of finding photographs, I would say that the if we're going to put a not a rule, if we're going to put we'll call it a rule. Right? When you want to just be relaxing with a cup of coffee in the morning or a glass of wine in the afternoon, those two relaxation points of the day is the very time you need to be out there taking photographs if you have
Hmm.
any hope of having anything. In the early morning, like just as an example, tomorrow morning, I mean, right now, I don't know, maybe 7:30 in the morning here in LA. I'm not sure, depending on where you live and so on, but early. So you're just getting the lights on tops of things or long blasts of sunlight between alleys or something
Right.
across a road
Right.
early. Go out then and start wandering around and think in terms of light and dark. Squint and think in terms of light and dark with a viewfinder or in the afternoon, same thing. Then you'll start to find things to paint.
That is so true. It's amazing because with the art that I've used to do, and I still kind of going to bring it back, is that sunrise and sunsets, and because they just emit such emotion, I think just on their own. And I'm in Texas, so we have some really beautiful sunsets that are just like, oh my gosh, the colors are crazy. But the part that you're talking about is the part that I'm also fascinated with, lights and shadows. I mean, just if I go out onto a Texas summer day, let's say 12 o'clock noon, let's say I'm in the Austin area, and there's no light and shadow.
There
It's
ain't
all
anything.
light. It's
All
just
right.
it's just, everything's bright. No matter what you look at, it's just all bright. I say, no, wait till the evening. In the morning, that's when you get these tree colors that are just doing the shade thing, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's fascinating. But you're right. The photos that I go after and have seen and I've collected, they don't amount up to painting. They just don't. And so I'm sitting there saying,
Sure.
okay, how does one get that? And it's a learning process. And I think you kind of touched on it. I mean, left right brain scenario. I mean, it's like how do I how do I make my brain work from I want to take a picture of my kid who's having a birthday. In fact, mine's having a birthday today, in fact. And then go ahead and just say, well, that's a nice photo. And what you see in the CVS and Wards and all these other kind of stuff, I mean, what they're doing is it's just prints. We'll take that, we'll put a mat around it, we'll put a frame on it and say, hey, here's your picture of your kid with a balloon and hey, fun stuff. But from a painting and an artist side, it's completely different. It's
Yeah,
not looked at that way.
right. I mean, there might be certain people that could take a photograph or take a lot of photographs and be lucky with one of them that would get a picture of your kid's birthday and it, might be museum worthy. But the point
Mhm.
is, for you personally, you just want a picture of your kid, right? It's got
Right.
nothing to do with painting. I mean, it's a different thing. It's a different arena. I mean, snapshots and the pictures we take on with our camera and all that, that's a different world. It's a different function.
But there's so many trying to make it their function as far as saying it's a paint, it's a piece of art. And and I look at it probably like you. No, this is not art. This is just a scribble kind of in some instances. Some of it is. It's like it's very low key. It has nothing to do with what but they label it as art. And this is where I have a problem with people who call themselves artists and really consider in my book are not. And they just sketch something out and say there's art, but they've lost foundations, they've lost guidelines, they've lost color, they've lost so much that they don't realize that even supposed to be there, and it is. You agree with
Well,
that?
well, I mean, I suppose what you're actually getting at is that in the Western tradition of making paintings, 500 years of it, we have a series of conventions, right? We have conventions about how we use perspective, how we use color, how we use drawing in
Mm-hmm.
order to create a representational image. And then in the last 100 years, let's say 150 years, we've had people breaking those, like the Impressionists being the first
Mm-hmm.
example, in
Mm-hmm.
breaking these conventions, holding, and then like Cubism, like, whoa, serious break. And then Duchamp, oh my God, break. And then, all the things that have rolled out since then. But if you're saying that, and I'm getting back to your point about this artist, that's not an artist. If someone is saying, I am making art now using this 500-year convention, and I actually don't know shit, then you've got a problem. Because
Right.
if you're wanting to be engaged in that convention, there's a lot of practice involved. It's like learning
Mm-hmm.
another language. It's like learning to play piano. There is a big learning curve to learning the conventions of representational art. And if you're saying, I'm in that arena, look at me, and you haven't spent the time, then your work probably sucks.
And that's
And it's
and,
not
and
saying that, like, what's that woman's name? I've probably got one of her books right here. Maria Kalman, I think it is. She just does these really fascinating books on kind of interesting conceptual ideas, and she fills them with illustrations. Now, those illustrations don't look like old master paintings. They're done or like Alice Neal in her portraits. They're not holding those conventions. They're bringing a high degree of personal expression into those conventions and leaving a lot of those conventions behind. But we still, because of their authenticity and their belief in themselves, we could say, we believe it. We buy it. It's fine. It's great. And so that is moving beyond the conventions, but it's moving beyond the conventions with a very high degree, I would say a degree of sophistication. It isn't just you're coming in kind of half-baked and blind and not, I mean, I'm not for a minute saying things have to be in an academic way following those conventions to be any good. I wouldn't say that for a moment. But I think if you're breaking those conventions, it's done with a degree of awareness that of what you're doing. Whereas I think what we're talking about in your case with this particular person, they just simply haven't done the work to be in the ballpark of being able to convince anybody that what they're doing is actually working.
Well, you bring up. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. But you bring up a point of saying, they label it and they say this is the convention of, let's say, fine art, and by no means has the time been put in, as you can, as I'm saying, you could tell that
Right.
it's there. But you also bring up a great point on the contemporary art. You walk in a museum and there are a gobbledygook of all sorts of, I consider at times, strange things. And I question, uh, is this art? Is this really considered art? I know, okay, you're in a museum, you're in a gallery, but is it really art? Is it because it doesn't, it's like you say, they kind of break the rules of conventions and hold themselves out. But I do notice also, as what you're also saying, that if there are some contemporary artists who actually are, I would say, use the word sophisticated, to the point that they establish kind of in a way a convention of their own, to where it is a level, another level, another step that you can actually see you know, the root working, that this person involved themselves into it. They really put themselves to a point where it is beyond just a scribbler, who just comes in and does it. Like the lady you were talking about who took the photograph of the lightning strike on the island that lit it up. I mean, now, could anybody have gone there and just, took a boat out a little ways and just said, I'm going to snap a picture when the lightning strikes? Okay, yeah, sure. Okay. The luck, there are those that are lucky that actually do find that spot and make it. This lady, she probably spent many, 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 many days, more than likely, of just saying it's got to be a certain way at a certain point. I've done 1,000 photographs of this, and only one made it. That one that I wanted, but I had to take 1,000 to get to that one. Same thing I think with painting too. One may make it off an artist, but it took him thousands or hundreds or tens just to get to that one. I'm actually coming to that space in my own art that I'm finding that I've got over 60 pieces of art, but I don't consider them well. I don't consider them very high up. But now I've and I'll throw a plug in for you, because I looked at your book, and I'm an impressionist landscaper, got into the greens, started looking from that point, palette wise, everything, the strategy, involvement, started using it. And I said, oh, look, my paintings just went up a level. Now these are better than the ones I've done before. The ones I did before were okay, but these are in a new class. They evolve. And I think I'm seeing like anybody else out there, I want them to see these paintings now. But they won't understand that I've been painting for over 20 years off and on, that it took me this freaking long just to get here. And some people,
It's a long journey.
it is a long journey.
There's a lot. See, one of the things about it, there's two things that you bring up that I think are really interesting. One is that, uh, you know that guy, Dr. Erickson, who talked about, what's his name? Malcolm Gladwell sort of popularized it with that idea of 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
he actually misrepresented Dr. Erickson's work because he's a writer, he's looking for something catchy, right? So as it turned out, at the age of 18, these violin students had, as a group, practiced an average of 10,000 hours. And that was way better than, say, catching them at 16 when it was 7,340, right? Which,
Mm,
well, right? Or
mm,
when they're 21 and now it's 13,500. 10,000 was catchy, which is why
mm.
he latched onto it.
Marketing, yeah.
Okay, he's got to sell a book. But Dr. Erickson said, no, 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 it's not the number of hours, it's the kind of practice. And his point was, if you want to get better at something, you need to do deliberate practice, which is focusing on the thing that you're not good at. Not like from the moment you arrive, you sort of warm up for 5 minutes, and then you spend most of your practice period, let's say if drawing hands, because if you're drawing figures, my hands look
Mm.
like clubs. Okay, got to learn to draw hands. So you draw hands every day for an hour for 6 months until they are fantastic. That's deliberate practice with the intention of getting better on that specific thing. So let's take an example. Let's say you get in your car in the morning and you're thinking, okay, I got to practice my high-speed turns here this morning. Well, when was the last time you thought of that? You don't, right? You got good enough to drive at a certain point, and there's really nothing inside your awareness now that is intentionally trying to get better. You haven't thought about becoming a better driver in decades, I would suspect, right?
Yeah.
Or, it's just like typing. Typing, 40 words a minute, sort of considered average. 80 words a minute, you'd get a job where you had to be typing. So I type, let's say 40 words a minute. I don't know what I type, but I don't try to get better anymore. I don't care. I don't need the job. I don't need to do 80. I could get to 80 maybe if I wanted a particular job typing, but I don't. I just function now at 40. And even though I've been functioning at 40 for decades, it doesn't get faster. I'm still the same terrible typer,
You're still 40.
right? So
Yeah.
there's no intention anymore of getting better. It's that deliberate, intentional practice over a
Hmm.
long period. Like, okay, I'll give you a best definition of talent I've ever heard, and it's absolutely fundamentally true. And it was Whistler. He said the ability to do hard work in a consistently constructive direction over a long period of time. That's it.
Wow. That's a
That's
lot.
practice, 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 deliberate, intentional practice, deliberate, intentional practice, deliberate, intentional practice. That's how you get to Carnegie Hall.
So what, but going with that, there is no there, I guess, a final goal, because the problem with that thinking is that you'll never be perfect.
Well, look, you'll never be perfect. That's a hopeless and ridiculous idea. The
Correct.
idea of
Correct.
perfectionism, oh, I can't paint because my painting will be bad, is the number one killer of creativity. Absolutely. And it makes you procrastinate. And it's that whole thing of like what I call in my book, Creative Authenticity, the dance of avoidance. All the things you do not to get on with the very thing that you sort of really want to do, but don't. And so um,
So
I
what are
want
books? What are books? I mean, books are nothing but, if I learn this, if I get this book and it tells me I can learn, I came up as a programmer. You can learn this language in, 6 days.
but that's
And so
marketing. You actually
that's,
haven't learned it in 6 days. You've
no
learned
one
enough.
does. No
No, no,
one does.
exactly. So Titian, right? Titian. I saw a painting that Titian did some of the work on. I think it was like maybe it was Bellini's painting, and Titian was like 16 or 17 years old. And they sort of pointed out the part that Titian had done. And it was like, oh God, that's depressing. But at 93 or something, he said, I think I'm finally getting the hang of this.
There you
Meaning
go.
painting. It isn't an end. Like, let's
There
take the
isn't an end.
example of learning to play piano. It's a little bit
Mm,
more open-ended in the sense of when are you good enough? Well, are
exactly.
you a concert pianist? Are you playing some piece that's like more complicated than the last one? What about learning a second language? At what point? I mean, you can converse and or getting in a conversation like ours now in German or French. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
come on, come on, come on. This thing goes on forever. There is no destination. All you're wanting to do is get a degree of fascination and curiosity with the process that keeps you going for the rest of your life. That's all you're doing. Getting out of the way of your resistance and finding a fascination with the process itself, so that you can keep doing it because there is no destination.
So the way I look at this is that you have, as an artist, that is my purpose. As an artist, I look for my strengths and build on my weaknesses. And I keep going down that road. And that's the road you stay on without getting diverted away into the noise or having any of that affect you. You stay consistent with building that up, but with keeping in mind you're never going to get to that level, because once you get to the level you think is the end, it goes on.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, it's like if you're
Like you win an award. You win an award for a painting. Okay, I've got it. I'm a great artist. I'm a good artist. I'm a.
and you go home
It's
and you
like,
realize,
yeah,
well,
and you're not.
there was a friend of mine who got a really nice review in Art News or something. She's a contemporary artist, and they have all that section of all the reviews. And she had
Mm-hmm.
a big show in Chicago, and very nicely reviewed. And she said it made me feel fantastic for about 15 minutes, and then I realized I gotta get back to work. Right? It's not the reason. I mean, it's a nice affirmation, of course. But I wanted to say something that you had mentioned earlier about, you've got 60 paintings and they're like this, like that. Kenneth Clark, who was the art historian who did that Civilization series years ago, BBC Civilization series. And he said, he did a lot of writing, but he said, you could destroy all the paintings of any artist in the history of art, except their four most famous paintings, the ones they're really known for, and their reputation would stand on those four paintings.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of times you go into museums and look at, I don't know, all kinds of paintings, something by Rembrandt, something by Titian, something by, I don't know, Caravaggio. I mean, all these great painters. And you're like, yeah, it's okay. I guess it's not my favorite, because his favorite, like, and then I think of what the favorites are, they're just breathtaking. So his
Mm-hmm.
point was, the reputation stands on these four or five paintings. Now, why is that? So I think we can get a clue. There's a poet named Randall Jarrell, American poet named Randall Jarrell. And he had a quote, and he said, a poet is someone who stands out in thunderstorms all his life and with a little luck gets hit 3 or 4 times. So that means you're doing paintings day after day, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're
Mm-hmm.
looking for inspiration. Chuck Close's his his quote about inspiration is for amateurs, right? You just go in there and you just do the work. You're a painter, you're engaged in the process, and every now and again, like for those four paintings that Kenneth Clark was talking about, or the 3, 4 times that Randall Jarrell said he got hit by lightning, you get hit by grace. I mean,
Right.
there's no word for it.
Right.
We know what it is. Grace has all kinds of religious connotations to it. I don't mean it in that sense. I don't mean like God is
No,
shining.
no, no, I hear you.
It's just like it's a degree of openness and flow, and you don't even know where it's coming from, but you were in the right place at the right time and
Mm-hmm.
ready. You were ready. You're already painting.
Mm-hmm.
This thing happens. If you feel that grace coming, whoa, grace coming, but I haven't painted in 2 weeks, it's gone before anything's happened with your brushwork, right? It's just this thing that happens from time to time.
But isn't that what most artists are just crying about? That they always want this painting just to be, every painting they do, they want it to be a masterpiece.
Of
And
course,
they try so hard to make it a masterpiece and they
that's why
screw up.
everybody's so miserable.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way I feel about it too. I say, my gosh, it's not gonna be one, you know? I mean, it just so what you're saying is it just kind of happens. It just like keep on doing it. You're gonna have a good day, good painting, bad painting kind of thing, and it's just gonna
You keep doing it. It's not that you're just this sort of dumb person making painting after painting, and once or twice you get hit by lightning. It's that you keep doing this deliberate practice. The general tenor of all your work is improving, like you were saying about your
right.
green, right? Everything's getting
Yep,
better. The
exactly.
entire, like, it's like the whole, everything lifts ships, or, when the tide comes in, all the ships are lifted. It's like, okay, the whole quality of your painting is getting better. You're seeing the improvement. Your
Mhm.
artistic vision of the things that fascinate you and that you want to explore and go into more deeply are becoming more engaging to you. All those things are going on, but
Right.
just sometimes things happen that are beyond your control.
I think a lot of things happen that are beyond our control. I mean,
Well,
really,
life
quite.
mainly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. But I mean, from a painting perspective, it's like, how did he do that? It's good to see an artist being an artist. I mean, so many are out there that, especially from the YouTube side, they're not really artists. They're just out there marketing for money and trying to make some. And it's like it's nice, and that's what I interview. I try to do my interviews on my podcast with people who are really into art and love art and art is number one and it is so relaxing, so fun. And this broadcast with you, Ian, has been absolutely great. I enjoy you coming on board. I enjoy you being here today. And
It was
my
fun.
gosh, well, we'll see if we can get some more going. So, hey, by the way, this is Phil McNally with Ian Roberts, and I'm glad that you guys came on. And this is Artist Artists, and we love having you. You take care, and we'll be back. Thank you.